L1, the report on the police programs. Welcome.
Hello.
And you also have 10 minutes.
Okay.
And if you could provide a copy of your remarks to the director's office, that would really be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Kaitlyn Ellsworth. I wear many hats as I speak to you today. Some may know me from the Black Council of Windsor-Essex, others the Windsor Black Educators Association, or one of the many organizations that I represent. But today, and why I always come with those other hats, today I come forward as a concerned committee member of the Greater Essex County District School Board's Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Committee. Since 2020, there is a portion of the Black community that has been steadfast in engaging with the school board, holding the school board accountable in terms of anti-Black racism. At first, through informal meetings, the tireless advocacy of the Black Council, along with some incidents of anti-Black racism, led us to Tana Turner Consulting Group, where she came in and did an extensive review of this school board in terms of anti-Black racism, and developed a 5-year strategy to combat anti-Black racism. Through this process, it has been revealed that the school board has an inability to engage with community members properly. The Black community members on this now dismantling anti-Black racism committee have been met with violence, superintendents calling the atrocious anti-Black experience of the committee members heartwarming stories, and a consistent unwillingness to properly engage the Black community. For 2 years as a community, we have shown up, even when most of us were fatigued by the school board's lack of urgency with which we were bringing forth issues and unwillingness to listen and to hear the community, handpicking who was to be consulted in the Black community or met with violence in the informal and formal meetings of the committee. Thankfully, in May of 2022, the Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Strategy and Report was launched and published. Here I am today as a member of the Greater Essex County District School Board's Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Committee, asking why there is a motion on the floor tonight regarding policing and the possible re-engagement with policing programs at Greater Essex County without engaging the very committee where this information was formed, the Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Committee. I'm here today once again, like my colleagues have come forward at the trustee meetings about lack of consultation throughout the last 2 years. There is an in-house committee established, and it is clear that this school board's administration is trying to sidestep that committee because of the fear of what's to come. The Greater Essex County District School Board recently underwent a review of police programs centering the voices of racialized, marginalized, and 2S LGBTQIA++ individuals, students. The results speak for themselves. This report speaks to the fact that Black, Indigenous, South Asian, and 2S LGBTQIA++ students do not feel safe in schools when police are there. This in itself is enough to cease all police programs in schools. Too long, a culture of incompetence regarding community consultations has been allowed to flourish at this school board, and it is exemplified in the agenda items today. Even the next agenda item hasn't come back to the whole Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Committee. We haven't met as a committee since November. The same day, one of your secondary teachers uttered the N-word to students. That was pretty public in this area. The Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Strategy 2022 to 2027 has a set of guiding principles in the document. They are as follows, and it can be found in this report that everyone should have read at this point. They are as follows. Anti-Black racism is a systemic problem in education. Poor education outcomes reflect systemic biases, not ability. Black parents and community members must be engaged as partners in their child's education. Let me repeat that. Black parents and community members must be engaged as partners in their child's education. Urgent change is needed. I'll repeat it. Urgent change is needed. Ideology and culture need to change, not only behaviors. Ideology and culture need to change. The board will adopt a learning mindset when implementing this strategy. The measures of progress for Black students and staff will be outcomes, not activities. Accountability and transparency. I will repeat that. Accountability and transparency. I'm here tonight to make sure that those guiding principles are upheld. I need to note something before I go on. Policing as an institution is systemically racist, anti-Black, transphobic, anti-Indigenous, homophobic, ableist, and more. Policing in North America is founded off of people hunting down formerly enslaved people who have liberated themselves from enslavement. trying to bring them back into enslavement by force and violence. The RCMP was literally founded to expressly make sure Indigenous people stayed on reserves. That means its foundation is systemically racist. This needs to always be acknowledged and recognized when speaking about police, regardless of the context. The review of police present and programs at the Greater Essex County District School Board only came to fruition because of the Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Strategy and Report and the tireless Black community advocacy in the committee. Policing in schools in Greater Essex was only reviewed because of the advocacy of the Black community and the work done in the Anti-Black Racism Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Committee. To vote on the following motion tonight would personally, I believe, to be irresponsible. Motion is as follows: that the board form a committee made up of, but not limited to, senior administration, school administration, 2 trustees, representatives, local police forces, and other community members as deemed appropriate by the committee to review the report and consider next steps. No police officer should sit on a committee such as this. No police officer should be at the table to espouse propaganda and further advocate for police to be in schools. The review of the police presence in Greater Essex has a few recommendations that I think people should hear. Greater Essex should remove all classroom-based engagements with police services in response to the finding that a majority of racialized, marginalized students report feeling unsafe with police presence in school. All school curriculum activities should be optional, require consent, and thoroughly communicated. Grade 6 VIP and Grade 9 BRAD content should be replaced with programming that engages community members in sharing their lived experiences. Greater Essex should provide training for officers who visit schools and engage with students. The report is explicit. There is no reason to make yet another committee with police officers at that to determine next steps. The school should tell the police next steps with proper engagement with the community, one of those guiding principles. Know that I do not take this lightly coming in front of you and speaking on this matter about police in schools. Hear me when I say this. I am against police in schools. I do not believe police make schools safer. The last time I spoke out and up unapologetically about policing programs in schools in an April 2022 Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Committee, giving an account of my personal interactions with policing in schools in the form of one of my Black students, while I was a Change Your Future counselor here, tasered and arrested at school. A police officer in that meeting dismissed me publicly, implied I was lying, and because I spoke up, that officer showed up at my place of work the next day. This advocacy work is not safe, this advocacy work is not easy, and yet the Black community continues to make themselves available regardless of the disrespect the school board shows in turn. I urge the trustee to not even consider this motion, to understand that this is continued disrespect, to know that a proposed committee with police officers on it, even though the police report is explicit, would be furthering that blatant and systemic anti-Black racism, transphobia, ableism, and discrimination against 2S LGBTQIA++ students who express statistically being the least safe in schools with police. The Greater Essex County District School Board housed the last segregated school in Ontario. SS number 11 in Colchester, Ontario closed in 1965. A lot of you were probably still were born by then, not me. It is not surprising that this school board is so incredibly behind and backward in dismantling systemic anti-Black racism in the form of police programs. Since yesterday was Dr. Martin Luther King Day, and I'm sure most of you engaged with him as a man and his sermons and his writings, his speeches, his preaching, his teaching, and thoughts in an extremely superficial and whitewashed way, I will leave you with this Black radical Christian, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, revolutionary internationalist who was deemed as an enemy of the state and assassinated for his radical work and words. The hottest place in hell is reserved for those who remain neutral in times of great moral conflicts. Some of you don't recognize that this is a great moral conflict and are part of the problem. Others don't want to go against the police. In the words of Dr. King as well, the time is always right to do what's right. The report is presented. The findings are explicit. I urge you to do the right thing.
Sorry, thank you. Do we have any questions for clarification from trustees? No? Trustee Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Speaker. Earlier you had mentioned that consultation is needed from communities, specifically the Anti-Black Racism Committee, but by the end it sounds as though you're not really opposed or in favor of having additional conversations. Could you just clarify?
I did not say that at all. We are sitting on Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Committee. We have regular intervals in which we meet. I believe that this should absolutely come back to that committee. We meet, I think, the beginning of February. This has not come back to that committee. We sit here as Black community members volunteering our time. And I'm going to say this, a lot of our time. Some of it has been really, it's been a struggle to be a part of some of these committees because we are Black people. We are talking about systemic and interpersonal anti-Black racism. It is harmful for us to sit in these spaces every single day, especially with people who haven't necessarily understood what we're even talking about at this point. It's been a journey, it's been rough and it's been tough, but we're still here. And so I absolutely believe it needs to come back to the committee. And if it doesn't, then it just exemplifies the systemic anti-Black racism that we're talking about once again.
Thank you.
Any other trustees? Trustee Burgess?
Thanks, Madam Chair, and it is for clarification because I'm trying to reconcile something, and I think it's for the speaker, but possibly for administration, but for clarification. I just want to make sure. The DABR, the Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Committee, has not met since November. I want to make sure that that's clarified. Was that what that the old board would have known that? This new board, they have not met since we organized in mid-November? Is that possible? And my question for clarification is what would prevent us from having met with Deborah when this was given more than a month's notice, like we knew this was coming?
Trustee Burgess, do you have a question of clarification from the speaker?
I can clarify.
I guess my question would be, there was an expectation that the DABR would be consulted in this motion. Is that, I want to make sure there's an expectation, which...
Unequivocally, I would say, and I can clarify. We have had working group meetings, but we have not had a large Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Committee meeting. So it is possible that this work and everything that is being talked about in this motion was in a working group. I don't believe, and I can't say that with 100% certainty, that one of the, I think 6 or 7 working groups were specifically tasked with this item because there is an external consulting dealing with it. So as a member of 2 of the working groups, that's not what we're doing in those working groups, but we have not had a meeting since November, and it has not been brought to the whole of the Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Committee. And I would say that there is an expectation that it would have been, because I will say that we did have the external consultant come to our meeting and did inform us of the process of what was going to happen. I was interviewed as part of that process, and so I know that this is not something that just happened overnight, but nothing has been said to us, but the work in that committee specifically is what is informing this review, and so it should absolutely come back to that committee. At least, first of all, I will say this wholeheartedly. I didn't even know this was on the agenda. I hadn't even heard anything about this. I happened upon it, and so I think that's also problematic because, you know, there is ways of communicating outside of regular meetings with our committee. I had no clue, and I have surveyed a few, most of the committee members, and that is the truth.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other trustees? And thank you very much for your presentation, and if you could provide a copy to the director's office, thank you very much. So trustees will get that. Thank you.